Hello everyone, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today with me I have...
Jeremy, Howard, how's it doing, man? How's it going? How's it going?
Oh my gosh, it's going so good, Jeremy. So good. Because first of all, to begin with, because you're on you're with me. Okay, I
Oh
mean,
man.
I love the last conversation we had a while ago, which was it was about like 10 things we look for in a Kickstarter, and it's been a while since the
Yeah.
last one. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so this time though is a lot more fun. I mean, I don't know if it's a lot more fun. We'll find
We'll
out soon
see.
enough. But this is going to be Play This Not That with Monster Hunter World.
Whoa.
Now, and this was your idea. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I wanted to do this anyway, but doing it with you is just twice the fun.
Yeah.
And Play This Not That, I usually have a formula I stick to, a structure I go through. But in this case, I'm actually far less concerned with the structure because I'd rather just go at it straight with you and see how this goes.
You know how
And,
to do it. This is what we should do. I don't know where it's gonna go, Alex. You know that. You know that about me.
oh, I
And,
know one thing. I know
you
one thing where this is going to go,
yeah.
which is where I ultimately
Okay.
end up in terms of my personal choice. But,
Ooh.
I mean, and half the people watching possibly know already. I haven't been that shy about it. But it's a more nuanced conversation than that. And I'm also curious to see where you'll end up. And I'm also going to bring in a third person just who's not here, but I'll just bring
Yeah.
him in because why not? But going into this, so let's start with the groundwork to those who are watching, because I always walk into the conversations expecting everyone knows what's going on, and they often don't. But
All right.
quick background is Monster Hunter World, currently on Kickstarter, link down below. Make sure to check that out. $2.5 million raised already. I mean, it's
Doesn't
been
need
a
help
day
with
and a
funding.
half.
Doesn't need help with funding at all.
Nope. Yeah, you're good. You can take your money, find that little indie Kickstarter. This
Hope for
guy's
that.
doing just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a monster hunting experience. And then there's Primal, which was on Kickstarter, a few months ago, towards the end of 2020, I believe it was, like
Yeah.
last month, just
Yep.
crossing over. And that one also did like $1.5 million day one, which is incredibly an accomplishment for a non-IP
Insane.
game. Yeah.
Insane.
And that one is also a monster hunting game. In fact, suspiciously similar to the Monster Hunter IP in a lot
Yeah.
of the broad strokes they hit.
Yeah. Suspicious. It is, but I did. This was my most anticipated game last year because I thought I was going to hit Kickstarter, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad that it hit Kickstarter at towards the end of the year at least, and then we got it because Primal was my most anticipated game. I've been waiting for that game for over a year, and I was
Yeah.
just like, please get here. And then when I found out a whisper a year ago too about Monster Hunter, it's like you can't talk about it, but psst. I was like, all right, well, we'll see because of the Steamforged record that I have.
Yes.
And I just was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I was looking at some of the other games, Nino Kuni, all these other things, and I was just like, I don't know. I mean, you've heard me kind of, poke at Steamforged.
Yeah, and same here. Same here.
Yeah.
I did my video yesterday. I'm doing it. I'll do it in the future. They, like you said, they have a spotty track record specifically with IP titles. It's. I mean, I'm not going to dodge around it. It's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is when I played it with them, like a week or so, it was like a week ago,
Mhm.
a week or so ago, I told them, I said, hey, man, I have issues with you guys from Dark Souls. I even said in the email weeks before that, I was like, I have issues with you. And the thing was, the marketing rep is aware. They're aware of
Yep.
what people say about them, and they care, which is really important. Honestly, like if you can show and prove is one thing, but to say like you care at the
Yep.
beginning of to me, honestly, that's something that's important to me. Because they, when I listen to the designers and the developers like talk about their game, they're passionate about it. They don't seem like they want to put out something that's crappy, whether you like it or not. But I mean, that's all I can go on, right? Until you fail me, right? Until you
100%.
show me otherwise.
Yeah.
I just take people for their word, especially when we get an opportunity to say that to them and they get to respond back to me. We'll see how that goes.
By the way, speaking of responses, I do want to jump in a little bit unrelated, but I don't know if you've been following the Kickstarter comments, but the degree of control and politeness that Steamforged is exhibiting in the comments is inspiring. What happens is in any Kickstarter situation, you have positive comments, negative comments, you have
Mhm.
both. And the typical way to handle it, most Kickstarters do, is the negative comments just don't respond. Ignore them,
Right.
move on, and respond to the positive ones. Steamforged is replying to nearly every single comment, positive or negative,
Yes.
and they're not engaging in a confrontational manner. They're just being polite and like,
Yep.
hey, thanks for being here, appreciate giving another chance, or, totally hear that you feel that way. We did pour our love and passion. They're being incredibly polite to some
Yep.
pretty aggressive comments.
Yeah, and you know what? And they can't. It's almost like you got to take it on the chin a little bit,
Yep.
right? And it's because now people have a chance to take shots at you. And you have to decide like what's your move going to be, right? What's your move? They got you on the ropes, they got you on the ropes. You're getting hit to the body. Your body can only stand so much, but you're also making a crap ton of money. So you almost sleep well at night. You're like, I'm getting beat up, but I'm sleeping well. I have a job for years.
Yeah.
But I understand it's like at some point you have to have good faith, and also you're going to have this game as a crossover type game. So you also want to show and prove to people who are coming in here that we don't address these toxic comments. I remember IGN used to do that. IGN used to go. I don't know if you know IGN. It's a video game and multimedia
something
company.
Game Network. I don't even know what the I is.
But they used to engage. They used to have a social media manager that would engage, and it got ugly. And like they stopped. Like that's the thing. It's like you either stop or you take the kind of like, hey man, like thank you for being here. Even if you backed it for $1, you're contributing to my salary for years to come. And thank you. I may get a bonus because of this, so thank you. So it's just like you have to take a better approach, and I'm glad they're doing that. Like I said, show and prove. At least I talk to these people, and they seem like they care about their customers. So that's good to me. That's good enough for me for right now.
Yeah, I agree. And when I first heard about Monster Hunter World, specifically because of the track record of Steamforged games, I was definitely worried. I was like, on the one hand, I would love to be involved, to preview the game, to go over and all that. On the other hand, I have no interest in covering the game just so I can say how bad it is. And so I didn't reach out initially. I wasn't interested in being involved initially. And the more they showed things about the game, the more I allowed that temptation to get a hold of me. That aspect of, well, it looks like it might be good. Also, I did play Bard Song, and that wasn't bad. I only got one play in, but it was like it was decent, and maybe it'll be good, hopefully. And I'm glad I did. I mean, no spoilers, but I'm glad I did, because whichever one is a winner here for me, I can tell you this much.
You're spoiling.
I'm getting both. No, I'll tell you. Right. I'm getting both. I've put out 4 different videos on this. I don't really care if people don't know this already. Both of them are solid games in my opinion. We'll get into your opinion shortly. But it's just a question to me of which one is better and at what, because in different categories, I think there are different winners on the table, which I think is a good time to jump into it. So let's start off the bat. Let's talk about something that's not even about the game. Okay. Let's talk about the experience, or at least your experience, of the Kickstarter so far. Forgetting the actual game, how good it is or isn't, what, in your opinion, what would you touch upon about the highlights of Primal versus Monster Hunter World, just in terms of the Kickstarter first?
Okay, so the Kickstarter campaigns they're not night and day, but they're definitely, I think the one thing that you highlighted right away was how the comment section is being dealt with. I can be honest with you, Reggie Games did a terrible job of supporting their backers. They didn't listen enough, or I should say they didn't do the response at the level that they shouldn't. They didn't replicate what we're talking about with Steamforged, who was really overly bonded.
Yeah, but late campaign, I think they did a solid job pivoting.
Yes.
Early campaign, it looks like they were just not prepared.
So this is a business thing, right? This is a business thing that goes across the board, not just board games. I'm talking about big business. Like, you have to be prepared for success just as much as like what happens if crap hits the fan. Well, what happens if things blow the roof off, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe you got to replan, maybe you got to tool some things around, and it's like, you know what? Screw these dailies. Let's just throw it at them, And there's nothing better than like throwing the kitchen sink and being done at day 8, and then just saying, hey, like, we got all this stuff. Maybe we can go back and look at some things, or you just kind of know this is what they have planned. I mean, we know how stretch goals work, dude. I mean, at some point they run out of ideas. At some point they go get their doodle book and go, hey, you remember that one we were going to work on? Now we're going to work on it.
And for better or for worse, those unplanned stretch goals can really cause issues in the game.
They can really, and make the development process longer. So we don't always want that, but we know that these companies are really trying hard to stretch out their content to make people happy. And there's only so much development time that they can take. We expect things so fast. So, and they are aware of that more now than ever, I'm pretty sure, So I would say, as far as the campaign goes, I was really not feeling really good about the Reggie Games. I'll tell you a little quick story about this. So I got fed up with Reggie Games to the point where, by the way, most anticipated game, very excited, love the game, almost no negative feedback on the game.
Hey, now who's spoilers?
Okay, okay, anyway. Edit that out. All right. No, there's still some things that I can say about it. But I was so disappointed in the campaign that I went to BGG and I started a thread. And I said, hey, I previewed the game. Ask me anything. I'll tell you exactly how I feel. I
You
work for Man
pot
vs.
stirrer.
Evil. I was sponsored. I want you to know that that sponsor, that's over. Once I'm done with the preview, that's over. Now you can ask me anything you want. And I mean, dude, the comments were crazy. I mean, they asked me everything because I played it so many times.
Yeah.
So it was like, I was like, first of all, I played it like 8 times. Guess what? That's a good sign. There's only 2 monsters in the preview copy.
I know. I know.
Like,
Both
I was
these
like,
games.
I love this game. So, yeah. Guess what? My copy's right there. It's staying.
I know. That's why I was rushing. You know, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get
right.
it.
Yeah, it's staying until the other copy comes. Trust. Trust. So,
Just have something to talk about over here.
right. It's just so I'm like, it's not going anywhere. So that just tells you right there how much confidence I had. But I was worried about the response at that time. I just was. It wasn't. I wasn't feeling it. And I wish they would have done better regardless. But they, there's probably a language barrier there. There's probably some, I don't know, just like I said, not much planned.
Yeah. And for myself, it's interesting because I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think I actually am more disappointed by Steamforged's campaign, which is interesting. Not because of the handling. Handling-wise, I think they're doing a better job. But I am very much someone who cares about the shiny. I am someone who cares about the extras. And with Reggie Games, I didn't walk in with any expectations because I haven't done anything with their campaigns. And so when they walked in day one, they're like, oh, we have these daily reveals, no stretch goals. It's slightly disappointing, but I didn't have a reason to expect stretch goals, so it's all good. Versus with Steamforged games, they traditionally have a model with stretch goals. And again, I think they're handling it great. I think it's totally fine. But something I've talked about with other campaigns in the past too is the idea of setting expectations. That when you set expectations with people, and expectations can be set from anything, including past campaigns, then to me it's like I walked in on day one and I'm like, oh my gosh, 1.5 million within minutes or whatever it is. But daily reveals and only seemingly so far, not gameplay based, cosmetic only. I mean, like 9 things that are extra in the campaign. I'll admit I'm disappointed by that because I thought there'd be more given Steamforged's track record. In fact, Bardsong, I actually give them a lot of props to Bardsong, where in the Pledge Manager, after the campaign is over, they still were releasing stretch goals in updates based on Pledge Manager funding without having announced that, without even being asked, just as a pure extra.
I would love to know how much money they make in the Pledge Manager.
Oh yeah. I mean,
people do not understand how much funding. I'm just gonna let y'all know this. Some publishers make just as much as they do in the. I'm serious, like
100%.
It's crazy. That's why they're giving you stuff, because they're making so much money.
Although to be fair, there are also those who make like 10% more. I mean, it's a range.
I'm saying, like, there are some games that just generate more buzz, and they're like, oh, Pledge Manager, or they're open forever.
Arena of the Contest, that Pledge Manager's got to be twice as high.
Right, it's got to be twice as high. Because I'm still looking at more.
So I walked in with that expectation. And again, it's not Steamforged's game. I mean, it's not their fault, except for the idea that I would have loved to know ahead of time and set my expectations accordingly. But, I mean, they're running the campaign well. They're being incredibly responsive. They're doing a solid job with updates, multiple updates per day, which I'm a big fan of, especially when you have these high-funding campaigns with lots of energy, keep the momentum moving. So in all that sense, they're doing a great job. In the sense of what's extra, what's not, I personally prefer the daily reveals of what's it called, of Reggie Games, where at least they had a monster every 3 days. So I'll take it.
So Alex, this is the thing. I had some working prior knowledge. I had some prior knowledge. But when I had that conversation, man, I just wish I would have recorded what they said. It was like the best response ever to the concept of what we give you and why we give it to you, instead of just giving you things. It was like the best delivery. And I was like, dude, you said the best response ever to like stretch goals. Like
I'm on board.
I've ever heard. But like, I want you to understand that, like, we're going to go into this a little deep, but like Monster Hunter is very much a prototype. It's very much a prototype. It has holes in its game. It's got some things that are going to get better. But that just means development. Like, that's what, like, I remember when I had Bloodborne, it still needs development, but it got developed. Cthulhu Death May Die. When you watch the video of Cthulhu Death May Die, it is slightly a different game.
Yes,
so it's like, you have to let games be developed. But what's there is the core, and you can see the core. But with that, it's like, how far do you want this to go, people? Like, you can only have so many boxes in an IP. Like with
IP. Hey, who are you talking to? Who are you trying to be reasonable with?
Well, I'm just saying, like, it's difficult. It's difficult to understand because you see them dollars, man. I'm looking at $289. Like, ooh, like just because I can afford it doesn't mean I want to throw my money at it too. It's like,
Mm,
but I see value differently. I just do.
sure.
And I want what I want. I want what I want. And I see a lot of very, very big, 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 big stuff. I think people don't understand that. You're probably going to have the biggest dragon you've ever seen in your life.
Oh yes, I mean
Here.
that thing rivals the Joan of Arc
Yeah,
dragon.
yeah,
Yeah, that's insane.
that's going to be Joan of Arc. What's his name from the KDM, the dragon.
Oh, I don't
So
know that
yeah,
one.
the cat
Yeah.
dragon, the KDM is gigantic too. So yeah, you're going to get some pretty big monsters. And all I can tell you is a lot. You got to pay for this IP, man. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
Wacky Racers wasn't cheap. You wondering why? IP time, buddy. Okay, like
Yeah, the IP is a big thing. People don't necessarily realize it because there's two different conversations to the cost. There's what cost is reasonable, and then what cost do you as the consumer
yes,
pay, which I think
yes,
is a great tangent to
yes.
the cost, where
Mm-hmm.
I do think Primal is a slightly better price than Monster Hunter World.
Yeah,
Slightly being the key word. If you're looking
yes,
at purely from the consumer stance, and you should, as a consumer, you should, then looking at it dollar to dollar, what you get, I think Primal delivers a slightly better deal.
yeah,
Not significantly so, but you get a little bit more in the sense of monsters, although it's worth noting Primal has variability to the tune of I think 2 modes per monster, I believe, and that's not even all of them.
three
Versus
levels, 3 levels, 2 modes.
3 levels, 2 modes, and then
Yeah,
Monster Hunter World has, and again, it's going to vary by monster, but between the monsters, like I
yeah,
think some of them have up to 4 different tiers
yeah,
for each monster, and so there's in terms of the monster variability, if you're just focusing purely on the sculpts, then I think Primal had something like 13, 14, and Monster Hunter World has, I believe, 11. So
yeah,
there is more variability in Primal in that sense. In terms of the hunter variability, Monster Hunter World is going to bring a little more hunter variability with 14 hunters, I
yeah.
think,
Hmm.
and Primal has I think 10 if I'm not mistaken, maybe
Yeah.
11.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a little bit of a toss up
By the
there.
way,
Yep,
I'm just going to cut you off with this one.
go for it.
Let me go ahead
Go
and
for it.
address you right here on this. How do you feel about? So let's say you have a character like okay, I'll just give you an example of a board game.
Hmm.
Pioneer Days
Sure.
has the board. You're like, oh my god, where's he
I'm
going?
like, what are we
I
talking
know,
about
but
here?
let's go, go with me, find me. So it's got 5 different decks,
Hmm.
right? And that represents 5 different groups that come to town. So you shuffle 3 of those decks together,
Yep.
which means that you could have a different game, darn near, every time. If you haven't
Sure.
played it in a while, you switch it up. Now there are games like miniatures games where they have different levels of the same character. Do
Sure.
you feel like that is as replayable as something that's like Pioneer Days, where it's just you really like, if you haven't played this in a while, it would feel totally different versus like, hey, I'm all in on Monster Hunter because I think it's got a long game to it. You might play a level 1, you might play a level 2 because
Yeah.
but assuming you haven't played this game a million times and you're like, we're just doing level 3s and 4s. I don't know, man. I don't
I
know.
think it
Sometimes
absolutely depends on how well it's done. I don't think Monster Hunter World is going to give you that level of variability. They're using the same attack aggression deck of actions. They're shifting up. You're going to be shifting stats to the armor, shifting stats to the health,
yes,
potential differences to the abilities and their resistances. But I mean, the biggest thing that's going to adjust the feel as opposed to just numbers is going to be any ability differences. So I
yes,
don't think it's that high. I'm
yeah,
fine with it. I'll take it, but I don't think the variability is huge there.
yeah,
Similarly with the Nightmare mode as well. The Nightmare mode in Primal as well. I don't think it
yeah.
necessarily introduces an additional level of wow, look how different this is.
Right.
I think it could be done. I think it absolutely could be done. I mean, if you take a game like Marvel Champions, where you have these kind of scenarios, or not scenarios, these whatever they're called, where you shuffle
Scenes
them
or whatever.
into,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the scenes, whatever, you shuffle them into your deck, and you have an expert set of cards. I think there's room for more variability introduced that way. But yeah, in the current sense, I agree with you. It's variable, but not going to be giving you a drastically different feeling.
Right. And I shouldn't say that all the way either,
Hmm.
because they do have the cards that you're shuffling in the deck, right? Like a
Yep.
different type of card. We haven't seen many of them though. It's like 1, 2, or 3, which I guess is enough, right? I guess it's enough. And it's like, honestly, it
Could
changes
be.
up. It changes up one attack, which is like, you can definitely change it up. You don't know where it's going to be. I don't want to look down upon that. Actually, I think that's actually pretty neat. Because it's like if you snuck up on somebody, they're not as angry. If you did, they're like really, they're like puffing up and defensive because you got there. So it could be defense added in there. I do appreciate that's kind of a smart little thing.
So I will say that my opinion there is going to be similar to most of my opinions around Monster Hunter World, which is I like it, but I also want it a bit more. I'm fine with it. I think Monster Hunter World is a great streamlined experience. We'll get into this stuff, but in many of these aspects, I wanted a bit more just in terms of the depth, and that's for me personally. That's why I think Monster Hunter World will be a very solid game for very many people in many different ways.
So you're gonna lob that one to me. I'm gonna say Monster Hunter. So I'll just say about this, like as an overview, so then we'll go dig into it. Like Monster Hunter is to me not the lesser of the two, but just two totally different experiences. And you have to decide what you're looking for, because I'm looking for more what Primal's giving me versus this, and I'm gonna own both.
Yes.
And I'm gonna own both because they give me two different things. And I got Wild Ascent on my table right now, and it gives me a totally other thing. Like they just give me different things, which means that something back here or over there has to go. Like it just has to go for space reasons. And also, it's like clearly I've moved on. Clearly I've evolved into something else with these board games. And some of these board games, I'm in a phase where I want to hunt monsters, bring them back to my camp, make myself cooler and better, and then go back out there. You know, like that's what I want to do right now. And yeah.
So we've talked about the campaigns. We've given some overview to Steamforged Games track records, Reggie Games as well. We've talked about the price point to a degree. Let's start diving into the mechanics of these games. What aspects we prefer differently? What is the same? What's different? And doing that. And I'll start this off with you. Pick any subject matter of the games that you want to compare.
I just want to talk card play right away because I'm all about hand management. I am a big card fan. We're talking spades. We're talking hearts. We're talking anything with cards.
Hate every single one of those things you just mentioned. But I love Cardplay.
You don't like Jim Rummy? I
don't like trick-taking games at all.
We like Tonk. Dude, we're talking all the cards.
Gin Rummy I like. I like Gin Rummy.
Who doesn't like Gin Rummy? I was about to expel you from my life.
You said hearts and spades.
I was about to expel you from my life. So, yeah, I really love the hand management in Primal more just because of the way the cards trigger. The cards speak to each other, you know? Like, I like the way I said that. They speak to each other. No practical explanation will ever be given, but it sounds good. I know. It sounded good, didn't it?
So I agree with you completely. For me, the card play in Primal is going to be a drastic improvement over Monster Hunter World for what I'm looking for, in the sense that every time you're faced with a hand of cards, you're making a decision around which cards will be played, which cards will be sacrificed to play those others. There are difficult decisions to be made around the affordability and the impact of a variety of different cards.
Yeah.
Whereas in Monster Hunter World, from what we've seen so far, it mostly comes down to just choosing the card that gives you the better stat. I didn't often feel that there was really as much of a puzzle around the cards that are played. It's like, okay, this one will deal 3 damage, and like the real choices came into play with things like perhaps the archer in terms of applying a coating versus attacking, or choosing to prioritize a breakpoint over damage. But Monster Hunter World Primal, with its 4 different categories, with its damage, it's controlling the struggle of the monster, and then it's two forms of evasion. I felt that there was more strategy and decision around the playing of the cards, versus Monster Hunter World, while we'll get to the pros soon, I felt the card play was less rewarding.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just thought it was less rewarding because you're really trying to fend off more than anything. But there's actually, I was going to say, the shield guy actually gives you more incentive to kind of stick around because, he gives you more incentive to stick around. And the guy with the sword is just devastating if you get in the right position. So there's definitely ways to play it, and it's going to get to another negative, but I do like the choices I have to make. There's some risk. There's some risk there. There's an intensity that gives, because it's like, hey, like you got to get up in there. You can't hide from this monster.
And that is an element of choice it's going to give you in terms of, while the choice of the cards itself are mostly just the damage, attacking and whatnot, there certainly is a degree of choice in terms of when you want to sacrifice your hand and when you want to sacrifice your stamina row around the playing of cards to avoid an attack, or when it's time to just suck up that damage because it's the right time.
Yeah, and I'll say that it doesn't feel immediately pleasing. You're thinking like, hey, I play 4 cards on my turn. Well, it limits your card plays based on the attack, because the feeling, and I was going to bring this up, I call it the struggle, where you feel the struggle of the monster. That's to me the biggest difference between these two games, of like how the struggle, like how's the monster reacting. I always kind of do this with the Primal thing, because it's like you do things that agitate the monster and it spins around, whereas like, because it's reacting, that's a reaction system that Primal brings, right?
Yeah.
It brings a system where you hit me in the tail. Well, it turns around. Like, hey, what are you doing? You hit me in the tail, right? Whereas, like, this one, you have things that will happen, and it's very much like Monster Hunter, honestly. Like the monster's just doing its own thing, whatever, and it might chase you down because you hit it in a certain spot. But like they do their struggles differently, and they both work well thematically, um, based on Monster Hunter World, and also
Hmm.
based on the world that's created by Primal. So I don't want to like completely discount what either of them do. It actually, I mean, the way the movement is and all that other stuff, like it's all playing out exactly how they want to play it and how Monster Hunter feels. So,
Yeah,
and they're not missing that at all. They're not missing that. And I
and that
speak at Monster
card
Hunter
play
Club.
as well is interesting because this is where I'm going to start bringing in this random third person known as
Go.
Jesse as Quackalope. But the card play of Primal, one of the things that I know Jesse didn't like, and this was not a problem with Primal with Monster Hunter World, is to a certain extent that exact puzzle that I appreciate about the card play. It can take away from the immersive feeling of what you're doing because when you're playing an attack, it kind of just makes sense. I'm playing an attack. I'm doing what I need to do. I play the card. It works. It's straight into the point. That makes sense. But when you're sitting there and trying to manage this resource system of cards in your hand, ultimately, the way Jesse put it once is, Primal feels like giving up 2 red so I can play 2 red so I can then trigger a yellow, trigger a blue, and play 2 red to trigger a blue. Meaning it felt less like an attacking damage based system and more like this resource management engine, which, by the way, I think Primal is. I
Yes.
happen to like that.
Yes.
But if you want something far more straightforward without sacrificing strategy, I mean, not to say sacrificing, there's going to be some degree of sacrificing strategy, but without giving up strategy altogether,
Hmm.
Monster Hunter World gives you a far more direct, simple card play system. Do you throw your
Yeah.
card, deal your damage, decide when to hold on to it for
Yep.
avoidance or whatnot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You also have like, so they both have like, if you play this card a certain part of your sequence, then something happens or
Yes.
whatever. So
I
there's
love
still some
that.
of those same choices. I like that.
Yeah.
I also like the feeling of distance in both games. By the way, somehow, some way they pull it off where you are a distance fighting character in one of those 4 slots in Primal, and it still feels like you're shooting something because there is a verticality to this game. Like
So this
the
is a great tangent.
yeah,
Let's dive
yeah,
from card
yeah.
play
It's just
into the boards,
the board.
the
Yeah.
movement, the positioning. Let's talk
So,
about that.
yeah. So I mean, really, this is a really focal point of this game because I understand how people don't visualize what's going on in Primal because you're not playing the cards, you're
Mm-hmm.
not doing anything. But like the person that's with the bow with the bow, she is like the best description of what the game feels like because she does the verticality, she uses the environments.
Yep.
Like she does a lot of things that go like, oh, like they're volleying arrows in the sky. Yeah, she's mounting. Yes, she's hiding behind stuff. Like you get the idea of what it is, but still you're just playing cards, which can be a negative. It doesn't feel like you're moving a miniature on top of the guy and clacking it in. Just name a game that does that, and that'd be great. I would back it. But they don't have those. Like you have to explain it through cards, right? And
Yep.
the card combos basically make her shoot arrows one way, duck under a bush, and then volley arrows into the sky. If that doesn't in your brain sound cool, like I don't know, like or
So
visualize, So
this is where I think for this one. So I didn't make it clear, but in card play, it sounds like we both prefer Primal.
yeah,
In terms of the positioning, I'll break down the why. For me, it's a
yeah,
tie in these games because I think both parts do different aspects better. I
mm-hmm.
am far more immersed into the actual what makes sense in Monster Hunter World. The movement, the
Yes,
monsters charging towards you, dodging out of the way, all those things make much more thematic sense.
mm-hmm.
But I would argue that somehow, and it's weird because if you've seen the board for Primal, it's just 4 spots rotating around in a
Tight.
circle. It somehow manages to feel, I would argue, more strategic.
Yes,
So I feel
yes.
more immersed in Monster Hunter World in this large board and this movement around, but I feel there's more decisions and tactical choice being made in Primal.
So think about it like this. This is a cool part about both. Like
Hmm.
especially for Monster Hunter, it's like you're pulling aggro, like you can like literally be like, come here,
That's
come here, come
Primal,
on,
right?
yeah, Primal. No, 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 no. Like I'm gonna talk about both in a different way. Like the guy, the shield guy, like he can basically you can make him so it's like, hey, come to me, right? You can make it, hey, come to me. I'll take this blow and I got all my shield stuff, and that's cool because the monster's gonna blindly chase pretty much anybody, right? Based on the cards, it's either
Yes.
up close or whatever.
Up
But it's
close or
like it
far.
feels
Yep.
good. It feels good to have them chase after you on this board. Like if that makes sense, like that just makes sense visually. You see this guy, this thing jumping, flying around the board. Awesome, makes sense. I'm assuming the dragons, other dragons will do some pretty cool stuff where they knock you across the board with their wings and stuff like that, like in Monster Hunter.
They
But
have this one dragon who like seems to be rotating to the side, casting
yeah,
fireballs. It looks
uh-huh,
so cool.
yeah. So there's that. But I love this intimate, like intense look, like feeling, where it's like just by you taking your turn, you are taking the risk of being targeted in Primal. Like
Yeah.
you're becoming the focal point by not moving. And that is like a tough choice to start your turn out. And you guys got to figure out how to negotiate that together. Because it's like, if I put you here, how would that benefit us if we're in the same spot? Are we drawing too much attention because there could be reaction cards that affect both of you? Like, if I play this blue card, what's going to happen with that card over there? So you have all these different things where, I don't know, I feel like both mats work. They do. Now, I don't need that. I don't need a big place with dots and I don't even need like a square spots to move around in like other games.
Yeah.
I like the intimacy that Reggie Games has in that Primal board. I
I think
couldn't
it's
believe that
incredible.
they pulled it off.
It's
can't believe they
incredible. Like
pulled it off.
I'm still baffled by how well the system works, considering it's literally just which way the monster faces.
Mm-hmm. But also the environments, like the environments
The
matter.
terrain, it matters.
But
I'm gonna hide in a bush. I'm gonna interrupt my turn, pop back up. I'm gonna jump on that rocky crevice, jump on the monster's back. It's incredible at what it manages to do.
I hope they address that in Monster World.
So this was one of my big complaints. I have a few
hope they address that.
Yeah, this goes back to Monster Hunter World does so many things so well. We'll go through that in this video, but one of my biggest complaints is some aspects I wanted more, and terrain is one that I wanted more. They have these two terrains right now, just water and bushes. And the gameplay impact of both of those is so minimal as to be barely a factor. Now, I say barely a factor, keeping in mind that as you progress through the campaign, they certainly can and will matter more. And I know there are monsters that interact with them in different ways, but those are more like half-hearted efforts to reclaim.
We don't have enough to know though.
Correct. And so like for right now, I'm just stuck with this aspect of okay, fine, there's terrain. They checked off that box. Like I want more. I want more terrain that matters more. Throw something in there that gives me more decisions in that space. And so yeah, I think going to the general board or whatnot, I think for me it's a tie. Like I said, the strategy versus the immersion, and moving on to terrain. Primal just does a better job with giving you terrain that matters, and it does. I'm not saying it matters that much. Some of the terrains, like if you start here, heal 1. If you attack from here, deal 1 extra damage. But it still provides a degree of choice. Am I willing to pivot to the extra spot, which potentially incurring the monster's wrath because I just moved, triggering its turn, but I plan on playing 3 attacks this turn and dealing 1 extra damage per attack can matter. There's more decisions around that.
Plus, on top of that, like the one dragon, he just like fire in one spot. It's like, hey, am I gonna stay? I want to stay because if I stay in front and I do this, it'll work. Or it'll pull me, pull him towards me, and then you can hit the tail, and then hit him in the tail. So then you got to hit him in the tail. So you've done it. Man, it's just really slick. Like I said, I'm surprised how they pulled it off. But I do like watching a monster run across the board and just bowl you over. I love it. Like you take this, just boom, 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 and just pushing you and throwing you. Like that's what it looks like, man. Like that's what the game looks like. You are this big monster running through you guys, moving his wings,
You're just constantly running.
Over there.
You're running.
Like, he's taking a ton of hit points. You're trying to hit, focal points. That's exactly what Monster Hunter is. Like, that is exactly what it is.
And have you seen that one monster? I think I saw it in an update where one of the monsters, you can't actually move to the side. You have to move in its forward line. Yeah. So as it charges forward, you don't actually have that control anymore. Right. You're kind of at the mercy of what's happening because it's really bullheaded. And this goes to the monster variability, which I think is actually a great tangent to monster variability. Yeah. How do you feel about the monster variability in these games?
Okay, so we've only played 2 of each,
in both.
Right? Okay, so fair it is. Okay, so 1, I think, let's start with Primal. The monsters felt different because the cards are different. Now, I don't know how many final cards are going to be in the AI decks for those, because, of course, it got a little predictable, because I count cards. I even count cards when I have a lot of scotch. I count cards. So I was like, all right, I think I got this figured out, but that's good. You're supposed to. The thing about this game, I'll tell you, when people do that, when they break decks apart, even if you have 20 cards, eventually, if you're any bit of a gamer, you kind of recognize the 20 cards, right?
Yep.
It's like Watergate. There's 30 cards. You know what the 30 cards are. After a while, you better. Otherwise, I'm going to beat you every time.
You're like, oh, you're going to take that journalist out of my hand, aren't you? Like, what are you going to do now?
Yeah, what are you going to do now, right? So it's like,
Oh, look, the turn immediately ended. Round ends. Like, you get to learn those things because they hurt you enough times. You remember
by the
them.
way, buy Watergate. Second one, it's a great game.
It's on my shelf somewhere. It's a great game.
Great card game, man. Anyway, and I lost my train of thought because of that.
You're talking about counting cards.
Yeah.
You get to know
so
the
it's
cards.
like, even if you're counting the cards, there is a feeling of like, not only, especially in Primal, there's still this intensity like, how are we going to trigger these off? Like, whose turn is it going to be? Where are we going to be? And then there's also
how much of what I want to do am I willing to sacrifice to not trigger them?
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, am I going to have a stall turn? Well, we only have a certain amount of rounds.
Yes, we do.
I like that, dude. I love that. Whereas, like, the cards in here, really good AI deck, they made it the same way where it's like, yeah, if you fight this thing again, you should know. What is there, 13 cards in the deck, I believe? 13?
Something like that. I think it's even less.
So, and then you add one. I know it's 10, so it's 11. So because you add one in there from 3 that are in there. So then you add those in. And I love the fact that on the back it tells you, like, if it's going to attack from range and what it's going to do. Like, that's really slick, because what will happen is you should, if you're going back out to this monster to farm, to farm stuff and get some more stuff, you should know how this monster moves. You're a hunter. You're getting better at hunting. So it's like, ooh, we know how to, when we fight this dragon, we know that it's going to do this, that, and that pattern. We're more prepared. We got some decent gear. We got better gear than we had before. We just need the, the headpiece and this piece. And that may not appeal to some people, but that's the way it goes. Like, if you got any grind in the game, that's how it's going to go. Whether it's built into the mechanics of it all, or you just play it enough like KDM where you know the cards.
And I think both games handle that grind to a degree well by effectively forcing you to reface the same monsters. So it's not that you're failing and then failing and failing, whatever. It's rather they're giving you opportunities to face the monsters as they develop, and hopefully you're walking into that next battle with enough extra knowledge and or gear that you can take this hardened, stronger version of a prior monster.
Yeah, and I think that, well, we'll get into the loot stuff, but like,
we'll do that next.
Yeah, I think that's the move. But yeah, I just think that, like, they both. It's another thing when they both got it right.
So for me, the monster variability is going to be stronger in Primal, and I think that's just the nature of the design.
Are you
space.
sure though? Wait, are you?
I think so. I think so.
Sorry, I got one more point. I think I want to make here.
Go.
What I think about what these monsters are doing, especially in Monster Hunter, I just don't know how much different they are. Because they have the same rule sets. And I remember King of Ever said this, and I was like, boy, you actually stole my point. Like,
he thought they weren't different at all, which I disagree with.
Well, I disagree. I disagree with that. Because they all have different patterns. They all have different range of attacks and things like that.
Not as different as Primal, in my opinion, but I definitely think they're different.
Not as different, but we don't know how different in the Primal either. We don't know. You're assuming.
We're just going based off 2 monsters, that's all.
We're just assuming. But that's what I'm saying, 2 monsters. But when you do have a rule set and you don't see, like, hey, this condition is for this this one or that one. You don't see enough of those in the rules, but the rule book looks done. You're like, what are we gonna have here? Are we just reading cards and, like, this one has 3 different? So it's like, I get how people would see that, but it's just something to think about. It's like, how different are they when they run on the same rule set? I don't know, because we don't know terrain.
So both of them only gave us a taste of the monsters. It is limited inherently. Yes. But I think different. That's why
slightly different.
That's why I'm going to focus more on the design space in general, because in Monster Hunter World, while the 2 monsters I faced definitely were different, and they definitely gave me different experiences, different approaches to how I fought them, even calling out different cards. Like, I remember in fighting against the Great Jagras, I remember I had a moment where I predicted a card that was showing up in the deck because I hadn't even played against it, but it was a fun moment for me. But in terms of the design space, the Monster Hunter World is going to give you a few areas to diversify. Both of them are going to have health, the health of the monster, obviously. Monster Hunter World is going to have the breakpoints and the abilities therein, which can adjust. It's also going to have the focus of the side of the monsters you can attack from. There might be monsters that you obviously are incentivized to attack from the rear because they have no armor on the rear, versus like frontally armored all around. There's a lot of design space around the armor, the positioning, and that whatnot. Each monster comes to the table with its own unique ability that will change as the monster levels up, or may change. I shouldn't say will change. May change as the monster levels up. And then they're going to come to the table with its own deck of the decision of the actions it's taking, how many hunters activate, how many cards they can play, and all that. Which is basically, a few design spaces. The ability, the breakpoints and armor, and then the deck. That's what it gives you. Primal gives you just more design space to work with. It's not that it's inherently different. It's just that there's more design space. They have a deck full of reactions. That's already going to be like, that's going to be the equivalent of almost like the Monster Hunter World's primary deck. That's going to trigger a lot of how the monster hurts you. And this goes back to a key point. In Primal, the hunters drive the tempo. In Monster Hunter World, the monsters drive the tempo.
Yes.
And secondly, Primal is going to give you the tier of objectives that it gives you. It's going to give you all these objectives that go for. So that's another set of design space to differentiate the monsters. Then there's going to be that third row of cards as well. What is it called again? I can't remember what it's called, but that third row of cards as well is going to give you a third set of design space to work with.
Yeah.
And while it doesn't have its own unique monster ability, or does it? No, the abilities come from that set of cards. So I guess, arguably speaking, I would say they both have 3 design spaces to work with.
Yes.
But I would say that in Monster Hunter World, one of those design spaces is a singular ability, and in Primal, that is the equivalent is going to be a set of cards that vary as the monster levels up or whatnot. So I think there's just a drop more design space to work with in Primal to potentially make 14 different monsters feel different. I don't know if they will. Like you said already, we've only faced off against 2, but I think there is more design space to work with.
I think there's a little bit of overlap in that game. That's going to be in that game with Primal. I just don't see it being that much different. But hey, I've been proven wrong.
But those first 2 monsters are so different.
They are so different. They are
like
so
ridiculously different.
They are so different. In Aeon's Trespass, the bosses were very different. The ones I played, I was just like they're both so different, like how they work. And the only reason why I know that they're different is because like the objectives are different, the way the monsters react when you get them to a certain level, the way the patterns they move at, damage goes up, they do different things, they put kind of different pressure on you. So I know that versus when I see the other ones, I'm like, well, I know the card that's coming in. I know, like, I kind of know enough. They give me a lot of information. I feel like Monster Hunter gives you a lot of information, like a lot of working knowledge and stuff like that. I like that though. I like both, especially when you have this overwhelming monster. Whereas, like, I just feel like they've designed overwhelming pressure into Primal. Like, it's just different. It feels different when you got something that's moving and throwing and changing your position. That happens. And maybe I haven't seen enough in Primal to know that. Like, they got that elephant thing. He might just throw you around. He might just throw you around.
I hope so.
I hope he does.
Toss me left, right, and center. Make me feel pain.
Big hole in their game, which I hope they somehow address, is having a monster move into the sectors and knock you out of your sector. Like,
which
just
is against the design space. Actually, it's interesting you say that. Interesting you say that because to a certain extent that adds a dimension to, and it's a dimension we've seen, it adds a dimension to the monster variability Monster Hunter World that we don't have in Primal.
Right.
Because those cards, while yes, the cards drive the attacks and whatnot, they also drive the movement. I mean, the great Jaguars and the Anjanath, the way they move around the board is very different.
Very different.
So I hear you, I guess. I mean, I think I still lean towards Primal in terms of my monster variability being a bit better there. It sounds like you're a little more in the tie section over there.
I'm in the tie section of that. It's just something about that, like, it just feels right. Like, to have, like, you can see the dragon jumping all the way over across the area and just like landing on everybody.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that's why for boards for the board presence I gave it a tie for that reason, because like, I feel more immersed in Monster Hunter World, but tactically Primal's just a solid.
I'm getting to this point where I want more boards. I don't know why. Like,
which one? In Monster Hunter or?
No, I just want more boards in board games now. Like, give me more boards. Isn't that ridiculous of me? Like, I'm not respecting anything I know about box sizes and cards and things like that. I know the business side of board games. I know it's not ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I want 4 boards. I want 2 double-sided boards. I want environments everywhere.
Don't we have 2 double-sided boards?
No, well, in
Monster Hunter World?
Well, they're just 2 boards. I think they're going to be.
I'm pretty sure there's 2 because there's 2 different campaigns. I think each one gives you a double-sided board. I don't know what differences there are. Each one gives you a
double-sided board. I want those in all board games. What I'm saying is I want those in all my big board games, like all the time. I want 2 sets of boards. I want so many boards in boxes, and just because I want so many different environments.
So speaking of getting things that are unnecessary, let's talk about the loot. Let's talk about the loot. So
how do you feel about Give me.
How do I feel about the loot? I mean, I'll just jump straight to it because I've been given ties and wins to Primal. I haven't yet given Monster Hunter World a win yet, and it's going to get a win in the loot.
Yeah.
Now, with the big caveat that I feel in both these games we've only scratched the surface of what they've shown us in the loot systems. But from what I've seen, I think I give the the win to Monster Hunter World in terms of the loot system that it
Yeah.
has, in terms of the way you attack the monsters. You pick apart their bodies, you've hit their breakpoints, earned guaranteed jaw bones or whatnot, and then use that to craft your own armor. Now, Primal also has its own forges that you earn as you go through each monster, and
Yeah.
some of the loot abilities, I think in terms of this goes back to the card play, I prefer the
Yep.
card play of Primal, meaning some of those cards you can get will have abilities that I find more interesting, more innovative or whatnot than what we see in Monster Hunter World. But overall, I think I prefer the loot system of Primal, of Monster
By
Hunter World.
by far. And you know why? Because Reggie Games didn't give us enough. They didn't give us confidence. They didn't tell us. You know, they didn't give they put us in a like a sort of not a middle. They put us in a one shot, right?
Yep.
So they put us in a one shot, and they basically said, "Hey, you get this gear. You know, so this is gear that you eventually would get. Here's a couple cards that show you like level 2, 3, and 5, so you can see what those look like in different different types. But you see what can become of those things. And also, when you defeat a monster in the campaign mode, you just get a slew of stuff. Like, you just get it. You don't earn it. You don't, chop it off and go meld the stuff together. You just get the stuff. And also, when you complete achievements that are in the game, you get other stuff too. So it's like it's done a different way, a little bit more arcadey,
Mm-hmm.
but this one is done a lot more like how I like it. Like,
Yep.
you're hacking stuff off, you're going for specific spots. There should be a reward for that, And then the other stuff, chuck it. So it's like
Plus,
that's
not
what
to mention the quest system, the fact that
Yeah.
you walk into each story with a bit of a progression where you can earn those bits, not just at the
Yeah.
end of battle, but in the beginning of battle.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We should talk about
Narrative
that
next. Narrative next. Okay.
Next. Okay. Yeah. Because I was just like, I think they got their loot system down, and I think it's just because it's more developed. I think it's just because it is more developed. Whereas, like, for them, they were kind of focusing more on like the true encampment stuff, locations, building, and they didn't have that part done to me. So it was very raw. It was very much like, okay, we're going to make herbs. Hey, we're going to get
Yep.
different color things, and you just saw that it's not going to be overwhelmingly awesome. Like, like Wild Ascent has it goes deep into that. Like, it's a very deep, like, hey, this is an encampment phase. Like, you got a lot of choices to make. Whereas, like, this is like, hey, not Monster Hunter, but
Primal.
Reggie Games at Primal, they really are more like, hey, you build these buildings, you get these swords, different matches go up. Whereas I like Monster Hunter because it's like, yes, you do still have those tiers and things that you need to go through, but it's like, you got to go out there and be specific about what you want. You got to use your resources together to make these armor sets, and that's Monster Hunter. That is Monster
That's
Hunter.
a big
That
part
is
of it.
not-
That end of battle,
that
rolling
is-
dice, choosing how to
yes.
split up those dice, choosing
Yep.
whether to
How
like
you
focus
do
them.
that
Lots
right
more
there,
choice.
That's Monster Hunter, and
And-
that's exactly why people should be excited about it. Like, that's exciting.
I think it's worth doubling down that I think in both these games, I did feel that we're only just seeing the tip of the surface here. So keep in mind, throughout this entire video, this is a play this, not that, of prototypes. The end products could be vastly
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, vastly different. And I expect most of those little details to be kind of cleaned up too that we're talking about.
And so, so it looks like we both gave Monster Hunter World a win in the loot system. And
Big time.
Speaking of narrative, which we touched upon, let's head on to narrative. How do you feel with the narratives?
Who knows, man? Who knows, man? I mean, who knows, right? I mean, honestly, can you make a case for either strongly?
So, no, strongly no, but who needs strongly? I would make a case for Monster Hunter World. This for me,
I read sometimes.
for me, Monster Hunter World is currently a win. Now, I say that with the very clear prototype aspect. We haven't seen much in terms of what these games give you. Primal gave me an introductory paragraph that made me feel like I was there and then kind of just dropped off the ledge. Monster Hunter World gives us a quest book with a choose your own adventure aspect. Now, I do wonder if that choose your own adventure has legs, and it depends on how they do it.
Yeah.
Is it something that's going to make me feel like there's an actual choice decision story driving me through the game as it goes? I don't know. But in its current form, when I played Primal, I felt like I was going through a system of, here's what you do, fight the monster, get your thing, craft your loot, upgrade, and move on. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a narrative-driven person. I'm fine with that.
Right.
But I didn't mind. In fact, I would say I enjoyed the Monster Hunter World quest book and the choices being made of, well, okay, do I want to camp by the river and potentially regain some health, but who knows what's going to happen? Do I want to go off to that cave because I want to look for more monster parts, but I might get more damage? There's a choice-based system that evolves around this tracking of the monster with gameplay impact that I liked what they showed me.
Yeah. So I think the best way to say it is like this. We once again total wild card with Reggie games. Total wild card. We don't know how they are as writers.
Yep.
We know some of their past history with lore. So it's like from their what is that Elo game or whatever they had.
Yes.
Like
Elo
there's
Darkness.
some holes there. We don't know. Like there's some holes, and they didn't. The stuff that I read, is very like fantasy-ish, like not really giving you too much. Just get out there and fight, man. Is that let's not talk about it. Whereas like Monster Hunter, as a whole, at least has something for you to chew on that makes you feel like you're doing something in the head. And they actually built some gameplay into it. Like you are having these tracking tokens that you're going to get that will ultimately affect what you do. Once again, if you're going down that path, you're reloading a chapter from a video game. You're reloading an area, so you should kind of know what path you want to take.
Yep.
After a while, there's only so many, so that's fine. Because people are like, well, I actually saw some people say like, well, you only get two choices, so it's one or the other. I'm like, dude, that's like if you play any
but
game
also
over and
it's
over
two
again,
choices in
know.
15 different
Right.
choices. That's a tree of
It's
decisions.
like, dude, people like that. Jeez, like,
and they give you a way to skip it if you don't want to go through that. They're like, oh, just take 7 time cards and move on.
By the way, if you play Monster Hunter, the story ain't deep, bruh. Like, it ain't deep. It's the world that's the story. It's like Dark Souls. Dark Souls didn't have that deep story until it got deeper in. And you're like, whoa, there is a story here. This is life. There's a life here. There's world here. But I feel like Monster Hunter World, not so deep in story. So I'm glad they even have what they have. And I can handle that. Like, I can handle what they're giving me because it's gameplay over everything, baby.
Yep.
Okay? Gameplay over everything.
Now, speaking of, so fine. So both of us, I mean, I think I gave a win to Monster Hunter World here. It seemed like you want to be a little bit more reserved.
No. I want to be reserved because I don't know what the final product is. But
100%.
I like where, as you can see, guys, like we play a lot of prototypes.
Yes.
And I understand the position of a prototype, and I also understand the position of myself as a buyer wanting to know more. And sometimes I think if there's something that you can take from us with myself and Alex is like we're being critical of prototypes. Like,
yeah,
if
you're asking, if a company is going to ask people to give up money, then they're asking people to give up money based on what they can show them. Yeah. So it's not criticism of the final product, but 100%. This is no different than when an investor asks for your money. They're asking you to pitch based on what they can show you. So yes, that's a factor here. It doesn't mean that the end.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It doesn't mean that the end product won't be significantly better. In fact, in both cases, I would argue they will be. But we're talking about it from what we know now.
And I wanted to end cap that with just like, hey, we can be so critical of this, but we also realize that it's very much a prototype. Yep. It's like there's still development down the way. We can still be very critical of this stuff so that one, that we can be critical. But also like, hey man, like, like we can tell there's a vision here, and like apparently you're ready to drop $300 just like we are.
Yes.
So it's like I'm just gonna tell you about the vision, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. I just thought like, oh man, I'm glad we're having it because
now you mentioned you mentioned Reggie's game's writing talent, which I think is a good tangent to going into the art and graphics of both these systems.
Ooh.
Yes. Because I'll tell you for myself, for me, Reggie Games Primal gets an instant win in the art and graphics of their games. Yeah. And this one is not necessarily a strike against Steamforged so much as the fact that they're dealing with an IP with rules, but IP or not, I still have a preference. And I loved the art in Primal. I thought the art was riveting. The monster sculpts, I actually think I'm fairly torn on them. I like different sculpts in both of them, so I'm fine with that. But in terms of the art, I loved the art in Primal. I thought it was, there's a word for it, minimalist. I thought it was minimalist while still being striking. Monster Hunter World does achieve the minimalist part, but it does so with icons and graphics and stills from the video game, which doesn't pull me in. Now keep in mind my bias here, I'm not a Monster Hunter World player, so I don't really care about these stills. But from an art stance, I mean, I don't know what Reggie's writing talent will end up being, but I'm loving the graphic design they brought to the table.
Okay, so as far as art goes, the only reason why I really don't like the Monster Hunter art is because they have to use art that I think is okay, like just at best. But they're cards, man. Like the cards, they have nothing. Like they're just symbols and that's definitely a prototype situation. You don't know especially because icons change. That changes how the graphic design of the card goes and all that stuff like that. You don't know for sure, right? That's a tough one to call though, because the way the cards look right now, they're black cards. They got symbols on them. It's I don't know. I don't know. All I know is the cards for the monsters look cool. Like they look nice and colorful and things like that.
Yeah.
The monster sculpts are fine on both sides. I mean, they got dragons galore, so it's like, how often?
Yeah.
How do you like your dragons, right? How do you like your dragons? You like them with big wings? You like one with smaller one? You know, that kind of thing. It's like, do you like them with big toes or short toes? I mean, it's all up to you. But yeah, the art goes. I like that kind of ink kind of style.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I like that
Splashing
in the
of ink.
Primal. Yeah, like those splashes. I like the action that they have. Like that game really does. Primal does a really good job of that. Like just showing this action, and you just don't think you would see it until you play it, or I would say you feel it, right?
Yeah.
Feel it.
And so lastly, or lastly for myself, I don't know what else you want to bring in, but streamlinedness in terms of which of these games, in terms of which one feels like a more streamlined, easy to jump into experience.
I'm gonna go with Monster Hunter World simply because all the movement is easy to understand. I think the only barrier you have in that game is understand the monster cards.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Everything else is easy.
It's like, what does this icon mean? Well, you actually don't have to figure out what that icon means until you do it twice.
Yes.
And when you do it twice, look at the board. Oh, okay, so I get to stop him from doing this card. Okay, that's it. You know, it's like if all they need is like 2 player aids, and you're good. Like you'll know everything you need to know. Movement's so simple. What you can do with your cards. Your cards are very easy to figure out. I didn't have to rule check any of that.
Yep.
So it was like, that's very streamlined. Whereas the Primal has some tricky little things going on, especially with the back arrows.
How many times do you say you played Primal? You said like 8 times, something like that?
Yeah.
I think I played it like 6, something like that. How many times do you feel you played Primal correctly, following every single process?
Oh, it's sloppy, man.
I feel I've played it 0 times correctly. I love it. Don't get me wrong.
It's sloppy, bro. You know what the thing is like, you know what a sign of a good game, honestly, is like, one of the signs of a good game is if you play it wrong a lot and it's still awesome.
Oh, it's incredible.
And it's still like the essence of what it is. Like they'll be like, man, this game is brutal. You're like, yeah, this game is this. And you're like, yeah, and you're like, you're playing it with them, and you're just like, dude, you played this game wrong.
Yeah, Monster Hunter World, I think I got it down by my second play.
Yes.
It is so streamlined in what it does. I agree with you completely. The hardest thing is going to be those symbols, and as soon as you read them a few times, you're like, okay, great, I got the symbols. They're done. It's quick, it's simple, the procedural basis for it, the way they handle it. They made a very streamlined game, for better or for worse. We'll get into this in the final thoughts aspect.
For worse,
but it's very streamlined. It's easy to jump into. It's easy to play. You teach someone, you get it going. It's very simple. Primal is... not that it's complicated, but there's enough moving pieces here. Moving pieces that add to the strategic depth, mind you. But there's enough moving pieces that I really genuinely do not think I've played Primal correctly once. I've loved every single play of it, but I don't think I've played it correctly. There's a lot more to manage.
I'm also going to say, I think Primal might struggle with player count a little bit. I think it might.
Okay, in terms of going up to 4?
Yeah, I think going up to 4 is going to be a little tough.
Because of those things to manage.
Yeah,
I can hear that.
Yeah, because it's also going to be AP prone because it's a card game, right?
Yep.
And it's hard, and the heart of it's a card game. So you got cards that trigger off of each other. The timing of how those cards trigger based on the reactions, and then you're also trying to warm your little character up for their special abilities too, like that. I can't remember what it's called, but like to flip your card over so you're focused.
Focus, yeah.
Focus card. So you're trying to get your focus condition to go as well. So that there's that. I'm just worried if it's like too many bones where it's like I play 1, 2, 1 and 2, and then when I get to 3 and 4, it's like, hey, we're gonna be here all day, guys.
But I mean, honestly, I agree with you completely. I didn't think about this. It's a good category to bring in about player count, but I think I agree with you. Monster Hunter World is far more forgiving of higher player counts. You'll get to do a little bit less, but you won't be making the game more complicated. Versus in Primal, I agree with you that even at 2 and 3, I found it to be incredibly hard to manage. And at 4, I think it's just adding another unnecessary person, like Too Many Bones. Again, great example there, great comparison. So I agree with you that Monster Hunter World is probably more forgiving in player count.
Dude, but I really think Monster Hunter has that down because it's like you got space. You know who's supposed to go in there, right? You know who's supposed to get in there. Who's supposed to be at distance. Once you get the gun guy, oh god, oh man, that's a character so cool. They have some really cool characters in Monster Hunter. Like they've figured it out how they're going to represent the characters. The setups, I should say, have different characters. But Yeah, man, I just feel like I like the space. That's where the space comes in visually to see like, hey, like I get to move in here or over there. Little bit, just a little bit of different feel that I think people will appreciate more in a general sense to have the ability to move around this board and know where your positions are. And it gives you more freedom as a player of how you're going to play your cards versus like it just feels so tight in Primal. It's just so tight that there's just a lot of like looking down, and I think it's just because of the way that Primal's built with that reaction system.
Yeah.
It's really just your turn is not necessarily your turn if you play the wrong card. And what are you going to do if you can't do anything but play the wrong card?
Yeah.
You know? And it's like it's just built that way versus like you just have to know your positioning on how you're going to deal with this at Monster Hunter, And I just like that. They just have their own way of being fun. That's why I tell like it's not about better than the other. It's really just different. They're so different. What do you want? What do you want?
So this is a
I
good time
wasn't.
to wrap up to final thoughts
Yeah,
to
yeah,
overall where we are in these games. We've gone through a lot of sections, scored different
yeah.
points higher and different each ones. I agree with you completely. They are different experiences. It depends on what you want. Ultimately, what's your preference and why?
Okay. Well, ultimately, I'm going to say I prefer Primal. Primal is just one slick card game. I can't get over card games when they're so good.
Yeah.
Like cards that trigger off each other. I played this card 2 cards ago. If I have a full sequence of these cards, I get this. I got this incentive to focus. It's got some KDM stuff in there where you have like certain armors that work with, positives and negatives. You can combo those up too. So you have this reaction to certain things. I mean, that is like my dream. Oh, it's my dream. I love that. And I just really was won over even a year ago about how that positioning works in the game. So there's even choices on how you move, and it feels like there's just so much more weight to your choices going on in Primal. It just feels like that. But then there's also the whole of being arcadey in a
Yeah.
sense. Like I don't know what their other portion is, which is just as important. That's the other part of my $400. The other half of my $400 is what are we doing after we're done fighting? So I'm worried about that. But with Monster Hunter is no slouch because I do like the card play in that one too. I like the risk. I like the run around. I like the way the monsters have control of the board. Unlike the players have so much control in Primal. I love that this monster can just muck up the blow up your whole plot, your whole situation, and I don't want them to react. I want to fight. Like I want to fight. They run one way. They run after my guy. We're in position. I love that feeling. I love what both of them do. It's just that I just prefer Primal.
So I agree with you completely. For me, Primal's a win. Primal's a 5 out of 5 for me. It's gonna be one of my highlights of the year. Monster Hunter World is a 4 to 5. I really like it.
Yeah.
I think it's solid. In fact, something I would argue that I'm very curious how it plays out. I think I would finish the Monster Hunter World campaign far faster than I finished Primal.
You it's designed to. It's
It's more
designed to.
accessible. It's easier to
Yes.
pop onto the table, to run through it without having
Way.
to worry about this, that, and the other. Primal gives me a degree of depth that I love, that I enjoy, that makes me tense and pulled in by it. But it also means it's harder to table. It's a different mindset of jumping into it. No different than Too Many Bones, which you brought up. Too Many Bones is
Yeah.
excellent. Guess which game I play more?
Yeah.
Zombicide or Too Many Bones?
Right.
There's sometimes accessibility makes a game easier to the table, and I think Monster Hunter World I will play it
Oh,
more. But I
dude,
prefer Primal.
think of how easy you can get that game set up.
Yeah.
Like
It's 2 seconds. It's 2
Monster,
seconds. It's
Monster
nothing.
Hunter. I mean, like we could do 2 1-shots. We can do 2 1-shots in a game night. I may take up more than half my game night getting through one scenario in Primal.
Yeah,
Just
it's so
because
thinky.
it's so much. Don't you say thinky again? That's a bad word.
I love thinky.
Um,
I love
I
it.
know. I know. You're such a reviewer. You.
But yeah, and I think
But that's serious. That's a big thing of like
Mhm.
Monster Hunter has that mass appeal, not in a bad way, but like it does. It just has like a comfort to it. It's simple. It's got easier choices on what to do. They're more straightforward. Whereas like you are really trying to figure out how your deck is going to be built
yeah,
in Prime. Like you have all this stuff where it's like you have easy goals. You have easy goals. You know where you're going in Monster Hunter, and it's like, hey, we got to focus on the tail. We got to focus on this. Like you know what that's like, and if you're familiar with the game, you really know. And I think people are going to be happy with Monster Hunter. People who are fans of Monster Hunter, I think they're going to
oh,
be very happy. Of course,
absolutely.
course, it can't be
Yeah.
like, Lord of the Rings. It can't be blow for blow, like the same thing, right? We can't hit home runs, but it definitely will be as close as it can be in a board game
I
sense.
think it's incredibly solid. Again, you're coming at it from the fan of Monster Hunter World. I never played Monster Hunter World. I know Jan from Quackalope is a fan of Monster Hunter World, loves what they're doing with it. I believe Jan and Jesse both prefer Monster Hunter World to Primal. Unfortunately, Jesse couldn't be here for this call, but I think that, yeah, I mean, there's going to be there's a real degree of these games are both solid. It
Yeah.
depends on what your preference is.
Yes, and like I said, I am not the case to be following for all this stuff. I'm blessed, man. I got money. I can do what I want to with my money. I try to tell people what to do with their money, as I always say in all my videos. It's just that both of them fit something for me, and they both have space on my shelf.
Yeah,
Like that's what I will make space for them on my shelf, and other games will leave with Volcanic Horse.
100%.
So that's just the way it's going to
I
be.
think that's all what it comes down to. It comes down to who you are as a gamer, what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Do you want to get both? And if you're trying to get one, do you prefer something that's a little more accessible, that, might be the IP that pulls you in? I mean, pay attention to the various aspects we both touched upon in this call and see which ones resonate with you more. Both these games do something very solid. It just depends on what is a better fit for your table.
So if you're having struggles with wanting to own both, and you just go, I don't know what I'm going to do, guys. Alex, Jeremy, it's too much. I want you to save your money for this summer. You know why, Alex, don't you?
Are you going to say Sankushishin?
Yeah, you save your money.
No, I disagree with you entirely.
Save your money.
No, if somebody...
Save all your money.
Nothing
all
against Sankushishin, but if something that...
No.
What if the person who's pulled in by the
and
simplicity
buy your
and
ice cream on
streamlinedness?
Sunday? Seriously, man, don't go to McDonald's and buy that ice cream cone on Sunday for cheap. It's okay. Save every penny, okay? Tell your daughter, no, she can't have that cotton candy at the fair this year. I'm sorry. Sankush.
Okay, apparently the real monster here is you.
I am a monster. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any daughters either.
So that's
But no, seriously, like that, like if you're hard pressed, man, don't chuck $289 plus shipping at something like that. I understand. Yeah. Don't chuck $364 or whatever it was, $426 US plus shipping at these games. There's going to be another gigantic one. There'll always be other gigantic games. Be smart, man. Do smart with this. We've had some really good games to back this year already. Mm-hmm. So, and there's more to come. May is going to be heavy.
Yeah.
It's going to be heavy. I had to say no for a lot of May. May is going to be heavy, and so is June. June is starting to back up,
It's
too.
never getting lighter. Yeah. Kickstarter, board games,
lighter.
With gigantic boss hunters, there's going to be more and more. The board game space is a tremendous place to be in right now. That gives us a lot of choice, which is a great thing, and it gives us a lot of choice, which is a bad thing. It depends on just how much of a FOMO person you are and how much you feel the need to own everything.
You can't have them all.
Yeah.
You can almost catch them all in Pokemon.
Gotta catch them all. Speaking of which, Pokemon, the big boss miniature game, is coming in May. It's not coming, I'm joking, but that's going to be a thing eventually. Just give it time.
Alex, I was about to lose. You know what, man? You're walking the line, man. You're walking the line.
Well, Jeremy, thanks so much for being here today. Everyone else, thanks for watching, for doing it, and post in the comments down below which one are you getting and why. Which aspects pulled you in? There's going to be, I think that my comment section is going to lean more towards Primal, because I think Monster Hunter World, though, I think there's going to be more copies of Monster Hunter World out there in the wild.
But you and I both truly love that game, like Primal. We really do.
Absolutely.
We truly love that game. I have been waiting for it for a year. You got on the bandwagon, and you went on the bandwagon too. But like Monster Hunter, we both were interested.
Yeah.
And in the almost like a response, I actually contacted someone and said, "Hey y'all, like Primal's here. You need to respond. Like say something, because I want to find out before I chuck my money at it." Oh, finally a trailer comes. Like right? Like,
yeah.
It's crazy. Like but they knew what they had, and they're confident what they had, and I'm so happy that they at least to me, they told me that they care. Like, they care about making a good game. And, like, all we can do is say, I know there's something good right here in prototype form, and there could be something better and possibly great, So, yeah.
Yeah.
And or they got $2.5 million of your money.
No, I'm looking forward to the final versions of both these games. I'm looking forward.
I am. My money's going to both, so what am I saying? Right? Who am I, right? Who are we? Yeah.
All right. So, Jeremy, thanks again. And to everyone else, let us know what you decide. And as always, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And I hope you have a good one.